Welcome everyone, this is On This Restart, and this time I want to talk about this rumored, or not even rumored, but leaked Nintendo Switch 2. Now, I guess it's rumor or speculation because we don't know if it's actually Nintendo Switch 2, but most believe that this Nvidia leak of this new powerful hardware that would be a Switch SoC is so powerful that it's strongly suggestive of a next generation of the current Switch, Nintendo Switch 2. So with this in mind, we're not going to go into the tech specs and things of that nature. It's not usually what I do here. I don't really understand that stuff too much. But what I do want to talk about is the release timing of this. If we're getting this information now, what does that suggest for the future of both the Nintendo Switch and this eventual Nintendo Switch 2, whatever it ends up being called? That's what we're going to be talking about today in this quick little discussion. Now, before we jump into things, let me first very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe or perhaps even consider joining as a member. So it should be no secret that Nintendo is working on their next piece of hardware. This should come as no surprise. Nintendo is always going through research and development for future iterations of their hardware or their successors. Once one piece of hardware comes out, Nintendo's already thinking about the next one. There may even be a few different options that they're considering, and depending on how the market goes and how the research goes and how sales go, things fluctuate, plans change. But the point here is that, yes, Nintendo is working on new hardware. This should come as no secret. But the big question is, when do we see this next piece of hardware? And that's obviously the focus of this video. At least I hope it's clear that that's what we're talking about today. And there's definitely varying things that are going on. Obviously we have this leak, but recently we got the announcement of Pokemon Generation 9, and just a couple weeks before that we got the announcement of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC that will be coming out throughout 2022 and 2023. So what does that mean for the rest of the Switch's life cycle? These are all things that have been happening as of late. We've seen Nintendo still mention in their financial earnings for like the second year in a row that we're about halfway through the Switch's life cycle. And speaking of those financial reports, we have seen that sales for the Switch are going very strong still. They just broke the 100 million mark, and numbers aren't suggesting that they're going to be slowing down anytime soon, perhaps a little bit, but they're in general seeming to maintain pretty much of a status quo here. They're only trending down just slightly, if anything at all, so there isn't really a strong sign that Switch is going away anytime soon. Typically, once hardware starts to dip down in sales year by year, that's when Nintendo will be thinking of ways to bolster those sales, be it price drops, new revisions, different color iterations, different bundle packs, and eventually a next generation, depending on how long the system's been going out for and how those sales have been trending. So with how strong Switch sales are going, there's plenty of reason to think that this system has still some legs left here. But what's interesting is that also we just passed the 5-year anniversary for the Nintendo Switch. And what's especially interesting about that is that most pieces of Nintendo hardware that are of the home console variant, even some of the handhelds, don't make it past the 5-year mark. And if they are past the 5-year mark, they're pretty much dead. They're not selling very well, there aren't many new games coming out here. Yet here we are in the 6th year of Nintendo Switch, and this is arguably going to be the biggest year yet. There are so many games coming out, multiple big Nintendo games coming out per month, and we still don't know too much about the second half of the year, but we do know that Bayonetta 3, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Splatoon 3, Mario Rabbids plus Sparks of Hope, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are all technically slated for 2022, and all probably for the second half, since Nintendo's already outlined their first half of the year. We are in for a pretty densely packed year. Nintendo and the Switch are not slowing down at all, and things are likely going to be going strong for a little while more. So I really doubt that this new piece of hardware that's been leaked is coming out this year. That just doesn't really make sense to me. I doubt that would happen, especially considering that just last October, we saw the release for Nintendo Switch OLED, a higher priced model that is more of a deluxe version or a premium version of the current Switch. And if you look at how Nintendo's been handling things on the Switch so far, it's seeming that they're waiting 2 to 2.5 years between revisions. Base Switch came out early 2017, Switch Lite came out September 2019, and then 2 years and a month later, we see Switch OLED come out October 2021. Now, a lot of people have been arguing, well, if you look at the 3DS, that had so many different revisions, surely they can come out with one within 2 years. It's certainly possible, but even with the 3DS, if you look at revision by revision, they waited at least a little bit over a year. And if Nintendo released a higher priced, more premium model, that next model that would follow wouldn't necessarily be another higher priced, more premium model. It would be more of a cheaper version or more of a lateral sort of type of version, like the 2DS, for example. So there really isn't much history here for Nintendo to follow up with new hardware less than a year or just about a year immediately after a higher priced model like a Switch OLED. And we take into consideration the global climate economic situation, basically I'm just referring to the supply shortages of semiconductors and such, it's very hard for hardware manufacturers in general to produce new hardware and get it out there into the market. So with that in mind, with strong sales in mind, with the history of hardware not coming out that soon after, especially another premium version following the previous premium version, there just really isn't any history or information suggesting, in my opinion, that it's logical to think a new piece of hardware is coming out this year. Now, I know there are some people who disagree with that because there are the rumors of the Switch Pro and a 4K version, and there is Breath of the Wild 2, and Nintendo does like to release hardware there, so I probably should go back a couple steps and say that there could be some logical reason to think that hardware could come out this year. So I'm not trying to suggest that if you think that you're a fool, no, you're not. These are all opinions here, right? We don't know what's going to happen. But I just think that there are more reasons weighing in favor of no new hardware coming out this year. But what about 2023? Could something happen in 2023? I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. If you follow Nintendo's pattern of hardware revisions on the Switch, I would say a late 2023 release actually seems pretty feasible. And this has been something that I've been thinking for a while, and I've been talking about it, but there have been different things that have been happening as of late that are steering other people in a different direction. And that direction would be 2024, or early 2024. And I see reason there. They give Nintendo a little bit more time to relish in the amazing sales of Nintendo Switch. It allows Nintendo and Nvidia to really put together and polish up whatever this hardware may be, and it also gives them more time to get through this sort of semiconductor issue and make sure there's enough systems available to actually have a healthy launch. So early 2024, I don't think is unreasonable, and really I feel like we're talking about a potential 6-month window here between holiday 2023 and early 2024. And by the way, there are a few different analysts suggesting that they're thinking at the earliest we see this new hardware early 2024. And it's important to note that we've been told that the Booster Course Pass for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe will be coming out through 2023. Now, does that mean that the DLC will end right at the end of the year? I think the DLC could, in theory, end a few months before the end of the year, and there could still be new hardware that comes out after that. Now, the interesting implication about this is that if we're getting Mario Kart DLC now, we're probably not going to get a brand new Mario Kart immediately after. There's probably going to have to be a bit of a window there. I would say at least a year, more likely 2 or 3. If even then, because Nintendo seems to really love just relying on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and depending on how this new hardware is handled and marketed, it may be the case that Nintendo Switch games may still continue to be sold and played well, perhaps even better, on this new piece of hardware. But something else I want to focus on here is a lot of people like to point towards Nintendo saying, hey, the Switch is halfway through its life cycle, as Nintendo has said. That means we still have another 4 to 5 years before new hardware comes out. I don't think that's the right perspective to have. And the reason I think that is because just because a piece of hardware may be halfway through its life cycle of it being out on the market doesn't mean its successor can't be out at the same time. So let's say, for example, that the 4-year mark, which is around when Nintendo started saying that the Switch is halfway through its life cycle, is actually the halfway point, 4 years, right? Nintendo could release the next generation after the 6-year mark. So we're 75% through the Switch's life cycle then, which isn't too far off from what we're speculating, by the way. And then the Switch will still be out on the market alongside this other piece of hardware, this newer piece of hardware, for a couple years. This would basically be how Nintendo handled the transition from Nintendo 3DS to Nintendo Switch. There were still some published Nintendo games coming out on the Nintendo 3DS in 2019. The Switch came out in 2017. Now, by 2019, the efforts were clearly not nearly as substantial as prior years on 3DS, but there was still some support. So basically, my perspective is that once the next generation system will come out, Nintendo may not even want to wait until the Switch is dying down a lot. They may want to hit things once the Switch is just starting to die down truly, and they want to support both systems for a couple years as the Switch winds down and this new system gains momentum. So I don't think it's right to think that we have to wait till like 2025 or 2026 for a new piece of hardware. I think Nintendo more likely, unlike previous generations, is not going to wait until the system loses all momentum and sales potential. They want the sales to be coming in year by year by year. So I believe they're focusing really hard to make sure that whatever they do, they maintain momentum here. They don't want to lose it. So that's just something interesting to consider, because that could definitely impact how they market this next piece of hardware. Will it be a seamless transition? Will Switch games play on this new piece of hardware? Will this new piece of hardware feel almost like a mid-gen refresh as opposed to a whole new thing, but still actually be a whole new thing? There's a few different ways this could go. I do feel like we're in uncharted territory here because the times are changing, some patterns are breaking, some patterns are holding. Looks at Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but either way, these are exciting times. Good games have been coming and more are on the way. The Switch is doing well. Video games in general, I would say, are doing well. And this new piece of hardware, it's exciting. Even if it wasn't supposed to be revealed to us yet, we at least know that there's something powerful coming, and it's gonna make Switch games look and run pretty good, or at least Switch 2 games. We'll see how that works out. But anyways, everyone, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you guys think that Switch 2 could be coming out late 2023 or early 2024 like I'm thinking, or are you thinking that it's coming out much later, or even earlier? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On This Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.